Just a recap of what we have seen so far in this understanding Git and GitHub. We have looked at Git and the GitHub as being completely different, although they have something in common, and the binding relationship between them is the Git. Git binds Git and GitHub. But the difference is that Git is a program that creates repository locally in your machines, but GitHub is a web server that hosts Git repositories remotely over the internet for sharing or collaboration with others. So if you want to get GitHub, you can go to GitHub website, open your GitHub account, and then create a GitHub repository there. So the difference between the two, Git is a program to create repositories. GitHub is a web host to host repositories, Git repositories. So that's the difference between the two. Git and GitHub repositories are needed for version control. Remember, Git repository is created locally on your machine. GitHub repository is created from the website of GitHub. GitHub is a storage for hosting Git repository. Just note that clearly. So to create GitHub repository, you have to create it from the website of GitHub. Use GitHub, create it, and then you start using it. Whereas Git repository is created locally on our machine. They are all needed for version control. So this is the architecture that I came up with to create a mental image, a mental picture of understanding Git and GitHub. As you can see, I came up with this analogy that we have our computer sitting in our home, and it contains our files, our folders, millions of files and folders without Git. So if you need Git, you can go to the Git website and download Git program on your local machine. There are some operating systems that come with Git as a pre-installed or combined component with the common component of the operating system, like Linux or Mac OS. But with Windows, you must install Git because Windows doesn't come with a Git program by default. So you need to install it. So once you have Git running on your program, on your local machine, you see local machine here, excuse me, the Git program will be sitting there without having any impact on any of the folders. At that point, my friend, there's nothing much you can do with Git. And I have demonstrated this in the previous video. So if you want to do anything with Git, you must create a Git repository by opening one of the folders, using git init command to initialize Git on that specific folder to make it a Git repository. Now, once you have Git repository, you can now do anything with Git. When you go back to the internet, to the GitHub, you need also to create a GitHub account. So having GitHub account as well does not guarantee that you have a GitHub repository. You must therefore create a GitHub repository from the GitHub website. Remember, GitHub is a storage, is a server on the internet used for creating GitHub repository. My friend, once you have created the GitHub repository, that will be a remote repository from your local machine. So you can now push what you have on your local machine to the GitHub. So you can link to the GitHub via some kind of link to your GitHub repository, or if you have already created repository locally, you can push that to your GitHub account. And my friend, once you have pushed it, you will have everything inside the GitHub repository where people will now share. You can share it with others, or you can get other people's code as well from the GitHub. There's one thing which is also common between GitHub and Git repository from the local machine. Local machine is a private place where you can control your Git repository, control your version by using Git repository locally. You can only share what you're doing with others via GitHub. Whereas when you have an account with the GitHub as well, and after creating a GitHub repository, my friend, you can also decide whether you want to make that GitHub repository private or public. So if you make it public, that means you are allowing everyone to see what you're doing with your GitHub. But when you make it private, then you have to give access rights to some people with whom you want to work with, to share your Git repository. So that is the structure. This is the architecture that I have broken down just to create an understanding of the paradigms of operating in the Git environment. So my friend, note that bar, that red bar there. That red bar is telling you that without GitHub repository, because Git program works only at the level of repository. Although you can configure some identification using some Git commands outside the repository. For example, you can configure your name, your email address, and maybe the default branch from outside the repository. And then when you create the repository, those details now will become like the default details for running the system. So that is the only exception. Otherwise, you will not be able to run any Git command outside Git repository. So take note of that. Now, Git repository is a directory or folder containing program for tracking changes or events, and that program is the Git program itself. So this is the architecture I came up with. I like referring back to it over and over again so that we don't lose that mental picture about the Git. As you can see, that is the local machine with the data storage, just a folder. That is just the folder we have in our system. Now, having a folder without Git does not allow us to control our version, but we can save as many data as possible in the folder, and we can create as many folders as possible according to the files that we want to control our version. But that is tedious, is not an easy and smooth thing that we want to experience. So in that situation, if you want to share our files, our documents, what we do, or have the backup copy of our file outside our machine, then you can go to the internet and grab the GitHub program. Once again, having a GitHub program alone does not guarantee that you will be able to control your version until you create a Git repository. A Git repository, as I said, is the folder that has been initialized with the Git program. That is the Git repository. So once the folder has been initialized with the Git program, my friend, you can now be able to run Git operations or operators or the functions to control the version, to do a lot of things and manipulate our files. Git will now track all the files, all the activities that we do on the files inside the folder that contains the Git. At the same time, we may want to keep the copy of our Git repository and maybe share what we have done with others. My friend, we can push our Git repository to the GitHub repository. But again, we must create a GitHub repository because GitHub repository cannot come by default. We need to have a GitHub account and then create a GitHub repository and then push our local repository to the GitHub account. So now the modes of operation in the Git environment. My friend, this is now what we are going to start doing. We are going to configure our Git with our email ID, with our name, and then we will decide whether we want to have a default branch configuration as well. Then we will create repository as our working environment, and then we will go through staging where we'll keep the file, temporarily before committing. We will revise or review to make sure that what we have done is the right thing we want to do. After which we will commit our file to save it permanently. And I refer to that as being scalability, because when you commit something, it's like you're building something on top of one another. So the version builds up like that, it is scale up. You can also scale down by deleting some of the files or going back in the history. But in most cases, there's no point to do that. So after creating our commit, we can now start networking with others by pushing what we have created locally in our local Git repository to the GitHub repository, which is created inside the GitHub server. Remember, GitHub hosts Git repositories, and you can create GitHub repository inside the GitHub so that you can be able to share your codes with others according to how you want it. My friend, as we go along, we'll be making proper use of Git and GitHub help and support, because they are there, for us to use them. So let's get started. I'm going to the internet to install Git, and that's what you usually do. I've already done it. I've done the installation of Git. Go to Git sourcecontrolmanagement.com and then install Git on your machine. And after installing Git on our machine, as you can see, we go to the internet, we grab Git, install on my machine, and create a Git repository by initializing the Git repository. So we have done the initialization of the Git repository already, but for the sake of our understanding, let me create another repository. So let's go to cmd This is our command line interface. I'm going to check if I have git by just typing git. There we go, I have git. To check the version of git, you just type git version. There we go, I have version git version 2.45.2.windows.1. So I have to create another folder. Let me go to the desktop, change directory, desktop, desk. I'm now sitting on the desktop. I'm going to create a folder. Make directory. I'm going to create a folder called git tutorial. Let me say git tutorial. Git tutorial. Yeah, I've created a directory called git tutorial, and then now I'm going to check on the desktop. You check by using dir, by typing dir. So after typing dir on the desktop, my friend, you will see everything found on the desktop. So I've created a folder called git tutorial. As you can see, it is found on the desktop there. So let us go inside that folder by changing directory, git tutorial. I'm inside git tutorial now. So let us check inside git tutorial whether we have anything by typing dir directory. My friend, the git tutorial is nothing. It has no folder. And let's see if we can access git program from there. Type git. Yeah, we can access git. So what I need you to note from here is that we can see git from anywhere because git is in our system, but git cannot see us when we have a folder without initializing git. So from this folder we can see git, but git cannot see us. How can we verify that? So when we type any of these commands you see on this side here, let's say let us just type a basic status command, and the usage is git. That means any command that you type, you must start with git. So just type git status. My friend, you can see from here clearly the fetal is telling us that not a git repository or any of the parent directory. So .git must be initiated or initialized in this folder, but this folder is still empty. As you can see, we have 0 bytes and 0 files in this folder. So let us go on the desktop and try to see if you have this git tutorial. Yeah, the git tutorial is here. When you double click it, you can see, my friend, git tutorial is absolutely empty. We can view and check the hidden files or the hidden items. You can see there's nothing completely inside the git tutorial file. So This is the file we want to use as our repository, and it is not a repository right now. So just look at it like we are sitting right there without Git program initialize in that folder. But from this folder we can see Git, but Git cannot see us. That's why when I type, remember I am inside Git tutorial folder there. Now when I type Git from there, Git, I can see Git. But when I try to run Git command right now, like git status, for example, git, any command will not work. Git status, you see, fatal, not a repository. So my friend, at this point we need to make this folder a Git repository in order for us to be able to use it. Some of you may think like, okay, maybe that Git that folder is empty, that's why Git is not being recognized. Okay, let us try to create a file and save it inside that folder. Let's go to let us start programming now. We are going to start programming now. Let me open my Sublime. Vibration. Yeah, I was trying to show something on the image so that it can vibrate. That's why it's called sam.css. Now let us save this file. Save as desktop Git tutorial. I have this CSS file. Save in the folder. So let us go to that folder, Git tutorial. I have CSS file there, as you can see there. One file is there. And let's try to run any Git command without making it a repository. So we are on that folder. Let's check it first. Directory. So now we can see we have one file and is 1345 bytes, and as you can see the name there, CSS. So can we see Git from here? Let's type Git. Yes, we can see Git. You can see Git from here. Now let us try to type any of these commands. For example, let's type git log this time. Git log. My friend, you see, it tells us the same thing. Not a repository. So I'm just trying to do this to prove to you that no Git, no repository. That no repository, no functionality of Git. The reverse is true, because without repository you cannot run any Git program. So let us now make before making a repository, making this a Git repository, let us configure our username and email. So git config -- global git config global initialize name. Some config initialize email. So my email is, I'm going to use sam@hotmail.com. The configuration. So we've done the configuration. We've done the configuration of Git. Now our Git has the configuration without repository. So we have configured the Git. We have given the name of the person who will be using the particular Git on this machine and the email address. So we have configured Git now. So let us see. Let us now run our Git. We are still seeing the Git, and let us try to run any Git command. Let's say git status. My friend, you can see even after configuring Git, when we try to run any Git command, as you can see, I tried git status, still our folder cannot see Git. Still our Git cannot see our folder, but our folder is saying Git. We are noticing Git. We know that Git is here because we have installed Git is there. But our folder, this folder here is not being recognized by Git. So we have to make Git recognize this folder. And that is like opening the door. We have to open some door here on this folder for Git to go inside our folder so that Git start tracking the progress, the changes, the things that we do inside this folder. And opening that door, my friend, is what is called Git initialization. We have configured Git, but we have not initialized it. So when we initialize Git in this folder, that is, my friend, the concept of Git repository. We are creating Git repository now. So let's go and create our Git repository by saying, remember, you have to be in that folder. We are inside that folder tutorial. Yeah. And now we are going to create a Git repo. So we're going to say git init. Just that program alone. Git init. Git init. We are just calling Git to enter inside this folder. We are opening the door for the Git. We are opening the windows for the Git to jump from our computer and sit inside our folder. So my friend, you can say initialized empty git repository .git file .git there. You see this directory? Now when we check this folder now. Let's see what is inside. From here, my friend, you can see that we have only one file. Yeah? And that file is that one. sam2.css. But we cannot see anything from here concerning Git. We cannot see any folder. We cannot see anything. But when you go on the desktop and open this folder here, my friend, you can see we have .git there. But before, it wasn't there. So that is the indicator that now we have created a Git repository. This Git tutorial now is a Git repository. The Git tutorial now is our Git repository. This one that you are seeing here now. We have created a Git repository. So how can we prove that that folder is a Git repository? Firstly, we go and check inside the folder itself to see whether we have a .git folder there. My friend, you don't need to tamper with this .git folder. It is the one that is allowing Git to do anything, any track